Welcome, people to pod people, and I'm getting feedback that's a popular thing. Welcome, pod people, to season 4, episode 7 of Office Hours with Karpf and Loge. As always, at this time and in this place, I'm Peter Loge, an associate professor in the School of Media and Public Affairs at the George Washington University and a strategic communication consultant. And I'm joined, as always, by my erstwhile co-host,
Dave Karp. Erstwhile?
Sure.
I am the erstwhile Dave Karp, also an associate professor in the School of Media and Public Affairs at George Washington University. Listeners, I want to make it clear to you that we listen to your feedback. You have agency. And if you want us to have better lines than people of the pod people, you got to speak up. You got to speak. We're here, we're listening, and clearly we need better ideas. Help us out, folks.
I've gotten emails, several of which I've forwarded to you, saying that they are proud to be pod people to pod. It's been on the socials. It's a thing.
On the socials.
On the socials. On the interwebs. This is our last episode of the spring 23 semester. We're in the last lurch of educating these nice young people.
You don't want to do a special episode of us just grading things?
Just looking down swearing.
Like a mailbag where everybody emails in questions and then we just put a grade on them.
Yeah, I don't know. Damn it, we talked about this. Yeah, we could. That'd be more boring than usual. What do we got? Thank you, Alana, our producer. Thank you for our listeners and followers. People actually watch us on YouTube, so thank you. Tell your friends. Send us $5 and Dave will make up an ad. I think that's the new plan, right?
I think that is the new plan. Yeah, if people would like to be advertisers on our show or sponsors of our show, for the low rate of $5, we'll say basically whatever you want us to say. I don't know.
Yeah,
that's less fundraising than I just feel like it would be a fun bit, and we could use fun bits.
What could possibly go wrong? We'll give you a podcast blue check and let you comment in italics. All right, let's get right to it. Shall we get to it? This week I feel like is structure week.
Yeah, this is structure.
So what on earth does that? I wrote it down, but I'm not sure what that means. What does that mean?
Well, one of my go-to lines for those listeners who've also taken classes from me is that structural power is more important than narrative power, right? Like there are the wins, and this is important for us as communicators, that there are the wins of like, aha, I established my frame. There are the wins that certainly old debaters like yourself always think of, like, I scored some points there, I made them look bad. And then there's the structural power, right? Like this isn't on our notes from today, but like the past week or two has been all about Clarence Thomas just completely ignoring any semblance of decency or ethics, just outright saying, yeah, I can take all the sort of trips that I want from a billionaire. I can sell my mom's house to a billionaire who will then let my mom live in there rent-free while fixing it up for me. And I don't need to disclose that, even though disclosure rules, because what are you going to do about it? Right. And that's structural power. Clarence Thomas, comfortable in the fact that no matter what, he's just going to be a Supreme Court judge. Like all of the other wins you can have against him don't change that structural fact. And I feel like all of the comms lessons that I've been noticing over the past couple of weeks have been ones that come back to that theme. Does that feel right to you?
Yeah, absolutely. And comms people get, we've got the magic words, and you and I rail against that. There's no sort of magic bumper sticker. It isn't whenever the Democrats lose the presidential election, some academic comes out of the woodwork and saying it's because you didn't Frank Luntz enough or something, or that you didn't give a magic speech or something like that.
That's never a political scientist saying that. That's always somebody from a different one.
That's true.
It's like, shut up. You shut up. It's about fundamentals.
It's right. But some of those fundamentals are, where does power lie and who can do the thing, right? And if you don't understand that, then no amount of comms is going to work, right? There's no magical speech that Barack Obama could have given to get single payer healthcare, because Congress, it just wasn't going to get through Congress. There simply weren't the votes there. The Donald Trump is simply not going to magically lose a Republican primary because no labels is weighing in somehow, because there's no system in which those things can actually work together. It's the structure matters, and that limits what you can do. What successful comms people do is exploit the structure or work within the structure, but the structure matters. There are a couple of structural things happening.
One on that, going back to, because you already couldn't get single payer. Do you think, looking back on it, that we could have gotten the public option if Barack Obama had given Joe Lieberman a wedgie?
That was such
Or
a,
at the least, don't you think it's a historical failure that he didn't try? Like, shouldn't he have just wedgied Joe Lieberman and see what happens?
I feel like that was a Rahm
He would be
Emanuel
good.
play. I feel like it's more of a Rahm Emanuel
Rahm, like
play.
Rahm Emanuel wouldn't have given him a wedgie, but if he had, it might have worked. You're right.
It might have worked. It would.
Damn
It
it,
could
Rahm.
could
Damn
have taken him out back. But there, I mean, there are other the Affordable Care Act debate is actually another sort of interesting debate. And it's about part of it for me, having been through the Hillary
Right.
Clinton debacle, and then been there again for the Affordable Care Act. In many ways, I feel like the Obama administration overlearned the lessons of the Clinton administration and overcompensated. And there was, anyway, different story. Structure. Back to the structural piece. So, what are the structural things you're seeing going on? I took some notes, but I know you've got a few.
So one of them, and I want to note, since this is our last episode of this season, and our seasons go with semesters. I think the first episode of the season, one of the things that we flagged was, yeah, man, something's got to happen on the debt ceiling.
Right.
And we're now at the end of the semester. It's like, oh, nothing has yet happened. But we now have Kevin McCarthy starting to make some noise, putting out these statements that feel like messages in a bottle from every other debt ceiling fight, about how, like, he had a line I saw over the weekend about, like, well, if you gave your kid a credit card and the kid spent too much money on the credit card, you wouldn't just keep on increasing the credit card. You would, like, have a conversation with the kid. And of course, everyone on Twitter responded by saying, like, okay, but you would pay the credit card debt before you talk to the kid, right? You wouldn't default on the credit card, you silly dumb man. And part of what stood out to me was, like, you've had how many months, and that's the best you can come up with, right? Like, his comms team, I'm underwhelmed. But the other thing is, again, like, the dynamics at play that nobody can just come out and talk about as politicians is, Kevin McCarthy is going to lose his job if he comes to a compromise in the debt ceiling, because he holds his job by the thinnest of thin threads, and has a caucus that wants to get rid of him anyway. And that is nowhere near enough negotiating leverage to get any of the things he would want to get, because you're not going to, like, undo Social Security and Medicare to make him feel better about his bad job security. Like, that's not negotiating leverage. And so we're all just kind of sitting there waiting for him to realize, like, there's no play here, there's no win here. I guess the job I'm bad at, like, they're gonna need to find somebody else, or realize that nobody else wants the job. But like, those dynamics that are set up by the last election, right? Like, if the New York Democratic Party had done a better job, then Dems might still run the House and we wouldn't have to worry about this. But instead, there's like a small percentage chance that the global economy will crumble because we default on the US debt. And everything else, no matter what you say, everything else just gets informed by the structure of, there are these numbers, there are these other numbers within his caucus. Besides that, we're just kind of waiting it out. We've been waiting it for months, and I still don't know how it's going to go.
Well, that's also, again, is back to incentives, right? Within this structure, McCarthy wants to keep his job. It's a terrible job, but it's kind of a cool one. You get your portrait, you get your name on the office door. As he said, he hangs on by the thinnest of threads, and George Santos is running again. He felt to run for re-election because why not? Right? Honestly, what's the man got? Of course he filed to run for re-election. He's already been credibly accused of stealing money from a dying dog. It's not like the guy's got any pride left. So what the hell? Roll the dice, give it a shot. So he has to navigate that small band. Nobody wants global debt default. So he's putting out these statements. We all know what they're going to be. And we all know the math doesn't work. But these are, like, you can't magically message it, and the left is going to message its piece and the right's going to message its piece, but it all has to work within the structure. And so the question then becomes, at the last minute, in the dying moments of the deal, what does the Biden administration agree to do? And it could be stuff that they'd want to do anyway, and Republicans will agree to postpone it and have a longer conversation another time, and they'll extract promises that people may or may not keep, depending what the structure looks like at that point, right? And it's going to come down to the last minute, because you never get rewarded for cutting the obvious deal early, because you have to be seen to be fighting to the last. And it's only at the last we got the best we could do. I don't see markets reacting at this point. Everybody's kind of rolling their eyes. Like, this is, like you said, like, we've been having this conversation since the start of this semester, and you and I have been around Washington long enough that we've seen the debt ceiling debate and the government shutdown debate happen a lot. And as you noted, that we were talking before we came on air, this is an odd numbered year. And in odd numbered years, you do political ranting because you get rewarded for ranting, but there's no blowback for consequences. In an even numbered year, there are immediate consequences, especially to things like shutdowns. So you don't shut down the government in an even numbered year.
Yeah.
Like this is kind of how it goes. And as comms people, we have to work within that. There are other structural things going on. There's a lot of noise, but it's really around the structure.
A lot of noise. I've been finding the Republican presidential campaign more interesting than I usually do in April of an odd numbered year. I feel like this has been an entertaining couple of weeks where Trump is getting, like he's facing charges in New York. We're waiting on him facing charges in plenty of other places. He is holding rallies. DeSantis is still the natural opponent, but most of the polling that's showing up is showing what I will proudly note. I was arguing back in December of our special podcast. I continue to think that DeSantis's candidacy is going to be Hobbesian in character. It's going to be nasty, British, and short. Like there's just very little evidence that DeSantis has got it. He's continuing to pick these fights with Disney that seem unwinnable to me. His latest is insisting that maybe since like Disney kind of handed him his ass on the Reedy Creek Special District, maybe he'll build a new prison right next to Disney World. And like on the one hand, this is, I guess, showing his base how vindictive he can be, but also like, sweetie, you're not building a prison next to Disney World. That there are actual people who go to Disney World, like lots and lots and lots of them, and they won't be excited about there being a new prison right like in the view line. Like that would be mean to the company you want to be mean to. And also eventually, like structurally, people are going to step in and say like, yeah, like you can talk about that, but nobody wants you to do that at all. And also Disney has more lawyers than you. So like all of this is going to go poorly. What are you doing, man?
But that's an example of comms taking advantage of structure. So that way you get to make all the noise you want without having any of the policy outcomes. And this is something you and I talked about, I think a year ago with DeSantis, saying he didn't actually want to win the fight with Disney. He wanted to be seen engaging the fight with Disney because there are actually policy downsides.
So like the thing that we ended up, like we did talk about that, and then we had to come back 2 weeks later and say, okay, we're a little wrong about that. Because my prediction at first was, like, he's not going to try to pass his anti-Disney bill. He just wants to make noise. And then he passed it. And like, it seems like this, again, is part of why I'm underwhelmed by DeSantis as a governing threat, is he strikes me as somebody who is making policy decisions based on how is this going to affect my narrative power in the next week or like 2 weeks. And like, don't do that, man. Like, go ahead and like wage the comms wars that you want to wage in order to win the news cycle, while also separately governing well, because governing well is going to help you out. Like actually taking structural moves to continue the fight with Disney doesn't help you out, really doesn't.
But it's that right. So he's messaging around the structure, and there maybe he's coming into conflict with it. But it's sort of this, like, I want to make the noise. I don't necessarily want the change. Okay, it looks like I'm getting the change. Now I'm going to make noise about the change. And he's also not playing to Florida, right? I mean, you want to govern well around Floridians. He had some pretty good rapid response to some of the hurricanes down there. This is to the national base, where he once again is trying to be like Trump with all the rage and animus, but none of the indictments are porn stars. The problem is it's not working.
Yeah.
I mean, my line of the week is that Trump is an aging rocker who keeps on tour because he likes the roar of the crowd and has got to sell merch to make the ends meet. But his base isn't getting any smaller. His base it's not getting any bigger, right? He's lost the majority of the popular vote in 2016 and in 2020, and the candidates he supported the most vocally in the midterms got their clocks cleaned in a bunch of races that Republicans should have won. So he's not gaining anything, but he's not losing anything. And for DeSantis or Haley or Hutchinson or Scott or anybody else to get the nomination, Trump has to lose support.
Right.
And so far, that's not happening.
And some of that, so I think there's two things I want to point out there. One is I like the aging rocker analogy. The problem is that all of these other candidates are like bands that play tiny venues but swear they've got a big audience in, I don't know, probably Germany, if we're being serious. Like none of them are actually showing that they can compete in any real manner. Because when you look up and down the field, it's like, oh, you don't really have anyone who's got it. And someone is going to be the nominee. It's a little tough if it's going to be Trump and he's in jail, which who knows. But like, I still think Trump's the nominee because like, who else you got? But then the other thing that really stands out to me is I always want to insist to people, and I think I've insisted before on this podcast, you cannot win the presidential nomination in an odd numbered year, right? It is April of 2023. In any sane democracy, the 2024 election has not started. The November 2024 election yet has not started at all yet, right? It is absurd that we are engaging in the November 2024 campaign in April 2023. And part of what makes it absurd is this long pre-primary where no votes are cast is one where no votes are cast. You cannot win anything. All you can do is lose by running out of money and giving up, or like Mike Pompeo realizing like, yeah, you know what? I'm not going to do myself the indignity of running because it's really clear that nobody likes me, which is true. Mike Pompeo, nobody likes you. But besides that, all you really can be doing now structurally is saying, okay, we need to build up a supporter base. We need to build up campaign funds, maybe build up some campaign organization in states, though be careful about your burn rate. And besides that, we just need to like hang on and not lose, because they're like, all you can win right now, if you're not Trump, is becoming target number one, who he will nickname and make fun of. You can't win anything because there's no votes cast until January.
Well, it's also, you can win the you've got to peel supporters away from Trump, and so far that's not happening. So you can win some of that. Trump has already lost the elite debate, and we're talking about the Republican meetings in a few minutes. Trump has already lost, the Wall Street Journal. He's lost the establishment, but he's not losing voters. So all Trump has to do is keep hanging on to what he's got, which is what he's doing, right? When he was indicted, he got a fundraising bump because all of his base, and it's going to then retreat back to the norm, and he's going to remain where he has been. And I'm not sure if I pointed this out 2 weeks ago, but I do want to note there is precedent for somebody who's been arrested running for president. Eugene Debs, socialist, ran for president in, I think, 1920 in California.
From jail.
Yeah, he was arrested for opposing World War I. And, I would not have been the first to predict that Donald Trump would follow the example of a California socialist. But as Phil Tetlock has pointed out, political pundits like you and me are bad at predictions. So here's to Trump following.
Hey, now I'm a political scientist, sir. Political scientist. I've got a degree in my office.
I'm just saying, neither one of us would have predicted that Trump would think a socialist from California, that's the campaign playbook that I'm going to follow. But here he is. But he's got, all he's got to do, as you said, is hang on to it and then fend off challengers, which is what he's done with the pudding ad, which I
a little bit. Let's get to the pudding ad, but the thing I do want to push back on there is they can't actually peel his voters away yet. Right. Like they can peel him away in the sense that when polls are taken, some of his supporters might say like, yeah, I'm kind of thinking somebody else, but they can always return because there's no votes against. Right. So what you can do right now is like build your war chest, build your supporter base, take advantage of moments as they come, and don't lose anything. Because you can't actually lock up any Trump votes now. You can't lock up any votes now. There's no locking up votes to do. This is silly season. It is silly season for the next, probably 6 months at least. In that, just don't make mistakes.
Well, as you said, what you do now is you've got everybody's vying to be the not Trump. Mm-hmm. So when those voters peel off, if somehow there's some magical moment we haven't hit, hush money to porn stars, Hollywood access tapes, copying socialists, getting arrested, more indictments possibly in Georgia, if there's something we don't know, those voters have to have a place to go. You got to be ready to absorb them, which means, as you said, building infrastructure, lining up elites who are willing to say, yeah, I'll jump on you the moment I can, or get early endorsements, right? Which is, again, this isn't the sexy part of comms. This isn't coming up with the clever slogans or videos, but it's creating the structure into which everything then works. So when the moment happens, you're ready for it. Mm-hmm. Right. It's not so different than your boy Schachtschneider. And, as policy windows open, you got to be willing to jump through them, which means you have to have a policy ready. You have to have all the stuff lined up. So when your moment arrives, you're ready for it.
Oh,
I'm giving you a shout out.
That's Kingdon, not Schatzner.
Kingdon. Damn it, I was so close.
Listeners,
Kingdon.
listeners, Peter Loge just
Oh,
confused Schatzner and John
Kingdon. So that's what I get from
Which
straying from
means he now has to take my Stratcom class. You need to enroll in the fall as an undergrad.
I just that's what I get from straying too far from Baumgartner and Jones. I was
Oh,
trying to give you a shout out and I blew it. I don't know.
oh no.
That was embarrassing for me.
Stick to the Play-Doh, my friend. Stick
And Baumgartner and Jones.
to shaping things with Play-Doh.
I'm going with Baumgartner and Jones. All right. Yeah. So at any rate, if you are working in policy, you have to have a policy ready and everything ready for when the window opens, when the moment opens. These candidates got to do that.
So
Boy.
one other thing on if I was working comms on a Republican presidential campaign right now, not Trump's. And no, I'm not entertaining job offers, obviously. But if I was, I think the play to make, like I think what you want to be framing your candidate as is a candidate who is of Trumpism, because clearly that's what your voting base is going to want, but is also a little tired of fighting the last war and would like to move on, please. And that means that you kind of like, again, you can't lock up voters right now, but what you can do is constantly putting out messages saying, like, every time Donald Trump says, like, no, I won the 2020 election, you say, like, you know what, I think that the Democrats, I think we were robbed by the Democrats there. I also think it's time for us to be looking to 2024 instead of 2020, and just try to make a distinction in sort of the narrative between like the past and the present, so that as he continues to, like, you know, he's an aging rocker who's going up there and making it clear that he hasn't put out an album in years and years. And if that's your message while Fox News goes through whatever they're going through with Dominion, and as Trump faces more and more indictments and gets mad about it, like, sure, he's going to raise money, but what, like, Don Jr. is going to like peel that off for like Don Jr.'s activities. Like, sure, like they're going to do all that, but what you can do in this pre-primary period is make yourself be the candidate who represents that set of values, but is also tired of all the losing. Because if there's a lane, that's what a lane is for them.
Well, let's talk then about the Republican gathering, where you had a lot of Republican elites saying we're tired of Trump. Let's focus on winning 2024. We're done talking about 2020. You know, you could relitigate the past or you could move into the future. Relitigating the past doesn't return American prosperity, doesn't decrease inflation, doesn't create American jobs. All it does is rehash the past. We need to move into the future, right? A lot of basically Clinton messaging from the 90s in many ways. Hence, it just didn't work, right? The political insider elites, it just didn't work. And Trump has still got a grip on the Republican Party because they can't quite make the case to pull away from Trump. And is that like, how do you just wait? If you're a Republican, what is there a solution here?
This is mean, but I don't care. I think one of the fundamental problems is most of the people, like there's a certain artistry that is required to have that discipline and that insight to say, how do we untangle the Trump knots? And I think pretty much everybody in the elite Republican network who had that sort of skill and insight fled the building or was driven from the building years ago, right? Like, this is the equivalent of most of Washington, D.C.'s major sports franchises over the decades, where it's like, oh, you gave up all of your draft picks for the next 30 years, and now you're wondering why it is that you can't field a competent team. It's because you burned down all your resources and didn't build a strong team, right? Like, we haven't talked yet about, I mean, DeSantis is signing this 6-week abortion bill in Florida. Like, the Republicans have figured out that abortion is a major losing issue for them. Yeah. And yet they cannot help themselves at the state level. Like, all the governors cannot help themselves from still saying, let's be the most aggressive. Let's try to be record setters in tearing women's bodily autonomy away from them. right? Like they know it's a loser, but they cannot help themselves. Sometimes we can look at that and say, we could say an incentive story there, but the other story we can tell there is like, oh, that's because all the talented people who could try to work that out, like find a way to balance that, left the party, were kicked out of the party. And what you're left with is like a AA baseball team that's playing in the majors.
Well, it's also not, those who've tried are failing, and maybe it's because of lack of talent, but maybe it's also structural, maybe it's a little bit of both, right? Because to win the primary, you've got to get activists, and the activists get on social media, they get in TV, they write checks, they go to rallies, they vote, they knock on doors. And there you've got to make people angry and afraid, and there's a sense of urgency and a sense of grievance and aggrievement, and that's worked. Right. So Senator Scott of South Carolina is trying to be a positive candidate. He's trying to run positively. He's trying to finesse the abortion question to the extent he can, and he's getting nowhere. And he ought to be a strong Republican candidate, right? He's got a terrific story, but it's a terrific personal narrative, right, that we want in America, that we want to believe.
Yeah.
African-American, elected statewide. He ought to be a great candidate, and he's getting nowhere because, primary voters and Fox News and the rest run on grievance and anger, and that's what raises money, turns out voters.
I'd take another angle on it, that he reminds me a lot of Scott Walker at this point.
Okay.
Right? Because Scott Walker on paper, like I thought, looking at it on paper, I was like, Scott Walker is obviously going to be the nominee. He is a governor of a purple state who is most well known for picking a fight with unions, winning, and then resisting the left trying to recall him. Like, anoint the fella. Of course he's going to be the nominee. And I believe that up until the first Republican debate, when I saw him open his mouth, and I thought to myself, actually, I think I muttered this aloud, like, oh my God, he's a goober. Like, what Scott Walker lacked wasn't like the compelling narrative of a personal story. It was talent.
Right.
And what Tim Scott lacks, like he's got the right biography for it. He lacks talent.
Yeah.
Like a person who I always thought, like, as the campaign went on, I kept on wondering whether or not Chris Christie was going to pull it off to become the nominee. Because like, I don't like Chris Christie on a policy level. Chris Christie has talent, right? Like it's not that there's no Republican governor out there who has skill as a politician. It's that none of them have been able to survive Trumpism unscathed enough to have any real chance. And there is also the will of the base stuff, but like, come on, like Tim Scott's problem is that Tim Scott isn't very impressive at this stuff.
Yeah, and he's also fighting the structural piece of it. Fox is Fox, right? And we all know what Fox execs and hosts, including Tucker Carlson, really think of Donald Trump and the nonsense around 2020, and yet they go on television and lie about it and continue to soak the base. And there's no amount of comms that could point that out, because Tucker Carlson has already told you what he really thinks of Donald Trump. And yet, there he was on TV a few weeks ago, listening to, like, wow, are you kidding me? What an interview. There was something in there for everybody, really. The Kim Jong-il fans, the Putin fans, okay, wow, that was, I did a radio interview about that, which means I had to listen to and pay attention to that interview. My bartender is grateful that KNX Los Angeles called out, but I'm not sure anybody else is happy that I had to pay attention to that interview.
Are you telling me that listeners, if they search around, can find a radio interview of Peter Loge drunk?
No, sadly, no. Sadly, no. There was the worst I did, I think, was the COVID interview on, I don't know, somebody who hasn't called me back since. That was a tactical error. All right, so Pence gets booed at the NRA convention because, again, it's the Trump party. It's a Trump show, and you have to show 100% fealty to guns all the time.
Okay, but also, again, I'm going to go back to this, which is there has never been a time period where people looked at Mike Pence and said, yeah, that dude's got it. Mike Pence, when he was in the House, was described as the House's dumbest member, right? And when he signed up to be VP, that was because everybody thought he couldn't win a second term as Indiana governor as a Republican Indiana. Like, Mike Pence has never had it. Of course, he's not going to be the presidential nominee. Like, he was hated as vice president. They wanted to literally hang him. And he's done nothing since then to leave people thinking like, oh, you know what? That guy actually has it.
But again, though, but even if he were super skilled, even if he were super charismatic, and he's not charismatic, you're going to the NRA convention, and because he said vaguely not entirely complimentary things about his old boss,
Mhm.
he gets booed. And so you've
Yeah.
got locked in this 40% of voters, this chunk of Republican voters who go to things like NRA conventions. And they lock on to this guy, and there's no amount of comms that appears to be able to solve that.
Yeah.
Potentially.
I think that's going to be right up until, well, actually, no, I think that's just going to be right because I think Trump is going to be the nominee. But I think that there is sort of a window there because the NRA base still liking Trump isn't something that I would call necessarily structural, right? Like
Okay.
they like Trump, they would also like to win, and they like their grievance. I do think it is possible to have somebody who is skilled enough at politics and political rhetoric that they figure out, how do I give them some of the things that they love about Trump while also making them think this is somebody who can help us stop losing, because it sucks when we lose to the liberals because then the liberals aren't sad, and I hate that. Right? Like that it's a narrow window. It's a very narrow window. It's partially a narrow window because the one thing I will say to Trump's credit is his decade plus in reality TV means that he is very good at showmanship. And a Republican Party network that is, and including Fox News, that is built around showmanship and grievance. Like he's really good at giving people grievance. That's not a magical hold that he has on the party. That is a thing that the party, it's a reality the party base wants that. And it's a reality right now that nobody else is able to give that to them without being Trump.
And that's the other piece of it. I want to switch gears because of time, but Fox is a for-profit enterprise. They need clicks, they need viewers. Carlson needs viewers. So he's going to do what he has to do to keep his job, to keep his fame. Same with Hannity, right? And you just can't, like, when's he going to wake up and do the right thing for America? Like, no, like the
Yeah,
man's
that would
got a
require
job.
him to have ethics or scruples that say I have enough money and there's something that I value more than that. And that's at least not going to happen anytime soon.
No. All right. So structure informs comms. So like that's one of the big lessons for today. One other lesson for today. We got an email from a regular pod listener, and regular dog walker with, as she pointed out in the email, a very healthy dog. Asking the 3 top tips for policy comms. So somebody says, give me your 3 best pieces of advice for policy comms. What do you got?
Well, you answered the email and yours were good. So I actually want to let
Wow.
I'm
Wow.
going to give you credit on air, which means this must be the last episode.
Holy cow. This has been a long semester, and your immune system is weakened or something. I think that the policy comms is comms. And I think policy comms is like the rest of comms, only much more so. So one, you got to have a clear, identifiable goal. What is the policy outcome you want? And a policy outcome isn't passing a law. A law doesn't change anything. If it did, there'd be no crime because it would be illegal. What laws do is create incentives or give money or something like that. So what's the thing you want? And is there can it be a rulemaking? Does it have to be a law? Can it be behavior change? What's the actual thing you want? The second is, who has power to create that or stop that? Like, who specifically? And one advantage of policy comms is that list tends to be pretty small, right? If you and I are messaging to GW undergraduates, that's a lot of people, and some of their engineering students, and poli-sci and polycom and journalism and anthropology. Policymakers, like, you're looking at 8, 10, 20, 50 of them. So you really get to focus, and you get to then cater your message to that. Then it's a matter of delivering the right message in the right medium from the right messenger at the right time to those sets of people. It's just super focused comms because you're looking at specific policy outcomes.
I think that's right. The only thing that I would add is, and again, you said comms is comms. That's right. This is true for everything. The better you can really figure out what is the status quo, what is the part of the status quo that is creating a problem for us. That then directs you towards what problem are we really solving, right? Like, it is the issue that, like, this policy is not getting implemented because people don't know about it, or because there's a set of actors who are in the way. Like, what is the thing that we really need to fix? And fixing that is going to require a strategic plan, not just comms. But that's how you're going to know what are my short and medium term goals, is by knowing what is the thing that is wrong with the status quo that we actually need to fix, right? What's the blockage we need to get past? And that's that helps you to focus your attention. And I think since usually in comms jobs, we're starting from like an event is happening, we need to let people know about it. An event just happened, we need to let people know about it. A report's coming out, let's get clicks on the report. That sort of day-to-day work ends up having enough there's a large enough volume of it that you rarely get to sit back and say, what's the status quo that's in our way? Because if we fix that, then we look like heroes.
And the other piece of that, so the fifth of the 3 tips, which fits with all that, I think, Paul, is how you tie all of this together. So you do something to have done something else, right? So if you're looking at policy comms, I need to persuade Congressman Karp to, co-sponsor a piece of legislation for tax breaks for small manufacturing, for small manufacturers. I will send the lobbying team to his office and say, you're meet with the legislative director, or meet with the chief of staff, say, hey, we know your boss cares a lot about small and medium-sized manufacturing. You've got a lot of idle plants in your district. There's this piece of legislation we'd love your boss to co-sponsor. Here are the other co-sponsors. You go home, and now I, as the advocate, send my grassroots team out to maybe come to your town hall meeting or the congressman on the corner. Maybe I, invite you to a Chamber of Commerce breakfast where the speaker happens to be somebody who would like to do more with small and medium-sized manufacturing. Maybe have a plant, but the tax incentives just aren't there for them. Maybe get a letter to the editor, an op-ed in the local paper. The congressman comes back to DC on a Monday night or a Tuesday, meets with the team, says, hey, all weekend, every time I turned around, I kept hearing about the need for small and medium-sized manufacturing. LD says, really interesting, Congressman. A guy was in here from such and such an organization last week saying there's a piece of legislation that'd love you to sponsor or co-sponsor. Can we get you on the bill? Congressman Karp says, yes, that'd be great. I'd get on the bill. Let them know, learn more. The policy comms person then says, this is great. Now we'll do an op-ed. You do a thank you campaign, social media. Congressman Karp, thanks so much for co-sponsoring. You're connecting all of these things, right? You're creating this little echo chamber, an entire messaging campaign at you for the thing.
Yeah. This is that's all old school, right?
Right. It's comms is comms.
Yeah.
Except with policy comms, it's super focused. You get to do this stuff in a much more focused way than you do if you're talking to middle-aged white guys at podcasts, because there's just way too many of us, or GW undergraduates.
There's exactly the right number of us.
Right. Yeah. We think no more after us. We came on the air. Everybody after us. Yeah, you're wasting time.
Too many. Once Karpf and Loge had one of these, it was clearly over.
That's it. They're here. Oh, all right. Well, okay. I'm throwing away my Betamax tapes. That's it. Throwing the last black. We're like the BlackBerry of podcasts. Oh, that was cool. Oh, that's not really cool.
Ooh.
Ouch.
Ooh, 90s tech reference. I have one more minor thing that I want to point out. I want to point to. Because we haven't talked about Twitter falling to pieces this episode, and that is my thing.
That is the thing. We got to musk it up, Dave. Musk it up.
Yeah, along with all the other dumbness. And at this point, both PBS and NPR have quit Twitter at this point because Elon Musk described them as state-controlled media or state-sponsored media, just because he was mad at them. He has now also applied that label to the CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. And the CBC responded saying that, noting that they have less than 70% of their funding comes from the government. And he replied, I think this was just yesterday, saying, great, we'll update that for you. So now the CBC's official account with the gold check mark and everything, saying it's verified, is 69% government-funded media. Again, what I just want to point out what I want to leave people with, since it's the last episode of the semester or of the season, along with structural power being more important than narrative power, I feel like another one of the themes that we've been covering all season, I think there's an assumption that people in power, there must be some meritocracy and they must be roughly good at what they do. And not only is that not a good way to run Twitter, that's not a good joke, man. 69, haha, but applied to the CBC on the official Twitter account of your company that was worth $44 billion, and now you say it's worth 20, so it's really worth 10. At some point, I think we just got to look at this and say, much like we're looking around the Republican Party elites and saying, man, just none of you are very good at this, even though you're the ones who got elected. You're also the ones who are still around. What I want to leave listeners with is there's not some secret strategy that makes what Elon's antics actually brilliant. The guy is as bad at this as he seems. Like, this is sloppy, lazy, and not very funny because he's sloppy and not very funny. Yikes.
Yikes. On that note, thank you, listeners, for putting up with us for the spring 2023 semester. Thank you, Alana, our incredibly patient producer. Thank you to all of us who follow us, who rate us, who do all of the things. It's been a lot of fun, Dave.
Yeah, it's been fun. We're gonna do
We'll
summer
see-
school.
We'll see you in summer school.
Summer school.
Bye,
Everybody.
everybody.